He struck me in front of everyone while the grill was still smoking, and my husband told me to just forgive and move on. They thought I'd swallow it like I always did, but they had no idea I'd been holding cards close to my chest all along, cards worth millions they desperately needed. When I finally played them, their entire world collapsed, and the very house where they'd humiliated me became mine. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served with closing papers and a cashier's check. My name is Elena Brooks, and at 34, I thought I'd experienced every form of disrespect my husband's family could dish out. But that Saturday afternoon in late July, at their sprawling Nashville estate, I learned how wrong I was. The smell of hickory smoke and charcoal filled the air as Richard Hale, my father-in-law, held court by his precious Weber grill. The man treated that thing like an altar, and every family gathering became his personal sermon on meat temperatures and marinade techniques. Around 40 relatives and friends milled about the manicured lawn, cold beers sweating in their hands, children shrieking as they ran through the sprinklers. I stood near the potato salad table, trying to blend into the background as I always did at these events. My sundress, carefully chosen to be modest enough for Richard's approval, stuck to my back in the Tennessee humidity. Mark, my husband of 7 years, was across the yard, laughing at something his brother said, oblivious to my discomfort. "Elena," Richard's voice boomed across the yard. "Get over here!" My stomach clenched. Nothing good ever came from Richard summoning me publicly. I made my way through the crowd, feeling eyes follow me. Richard stood there in his ridiculous grill master apron, spatula in one hand, bourbon in the other. His face was already flushed, whether from the heat or the alcohol. I couldn't tell. "You know," he began, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mark's cousin Tommy just had his third son. Third. And here's my eldest boy, 7 years married, and what do I have to show for it?" The yard grew quieter. Someone turned down the music. "Dad," Mark called out weakly from across the lawn, but didn't move from his spot. "2 daughters," Richard continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "2 girls, like this family name means nothing to you." He pointed the spatula at me accusingly. "A real woman would have given her husband a son by now, but I guess we can't all marry real women. Can we?" My cheeks burned. I'd heard variations of this speech before, but never so publicly, never with such venom. "Richard, our daughters are beautiful, healthy children. We're blessed. Blessed." He laughed, ugly and sharp. "Blessed is continuing the family line properly. Blessed is not watching my son waste his prime years with a woman who can't do her one job." "That's enough," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You don't get to talk about me or my children that way." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. His palm connected with my cheek with a crack that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent yard. The force knocked me sideways, and I had to grab the table to keep from falling. The potato salad bowl tipped, spilling onto the grass. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The only sound was the hiss of meat on the grill and a child crying somewhere in the distance. My face throbbed, and I could taste copper in my mouth. Then Mark finally moved, jogging over with an expression I'll never forget, not concern for me, not anger at his father, but embarrassment, pure embarrassment that I'd caused a scene. "Elena, honey," he said, not even looking at my reddening cheek. "Dad's been drinking. You know how he gets. Just forgive him. Okay, don't make this worse. It's a family party." I stared at my husband, the man who'd promised to love and protect me, as he put his hand on his father's shoulder, not mine, and said, "Come on, Dad, let's get you some water." "I don't need water," Richard growled, shrugging him off. "I need a daughter-in-law who knows her place." The crowd began to murmur, people turning away, pretending they hadn't seen what just happened. Mark's mother, Patricia, busied herself with refreshing the drinks table. His siblings found urgent conversations to join on the other side of the yard. And Mark, my husband, the father of my children, simply stood there, looking at me with pleading eyes that said, "Just let it go." I touched my burning cheek, looked at the people who were supposed to be my family, and realized that in all the years I'd known them, this was who they'd always been. I'd just been too hopeful, too eager to belong, to see it clearly. "I'm leaving," I said quietly. "Elena, please." Mark started. "I'm leaving," I repeated, louder this time. I walked through that crowd of cowards and enablers, my head high despite the humiliation burning through me. Not one person met my eyes. Not one person asked if I was okay. As I gathered my purse from the house, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The left side of my face was already swelling, a vivid red handprint marking me like a brand, but it was my eyes that stopped me cold. They weren't filled with tears like I'd expected. They were calculating. They thought they knew me, the quiet daughter-in-law who worked her data analyst job, who drove a sensible Honda, who never made waves. They had no idea about the investment accounts, the property holdings, the silent empire I'd built while they dismissed me as worthless. Standing in that hallway, listening to the party resume outside as if nothing had happened, I made a decision. They wanted to treat me as less than human fine, but they were about to learn that the mouse they'd been tormenting had been a lion all along. The drive home was a blur of Nashville's suburban streets and trembling hands on the steering wheel. I pulled into our driveway, the modest 3-bedroom Mark had insisted was plenty for now, and sat in the car for 20 minutes. Engine off. Just staring at the house I'd never really felt was mine. My phone buzzed incessantly. Mark's texts came in waves. "Please answer." "You're overreacting." "Dad feels terrible." "Come back and let's talk about this like adults." Like adults. As if I was the child who'd thrown a tantrum, not the woman who'd been physically assaulted in front of 40 witnesses. I finally went inside and mechanically packed a bag. The girls were at my mother's for the weekend, a small mercy. They didn't need to see their mother like this, face swollen, faith shattered. I checked into a Marriott downtown, paid cash, and spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying not just the slap, but years of smaller humiliations. The time Richard had joked at Thanksgiving that Mark should have married Jennifer Morrison, his high school girlfriend who now had 4 sons. The Christmas he'd given me a cookbook titled "Feeding Your Man, A Wife's Guide to Traditional Cooking," while everyone laughed. The countless dinners where he'd criticized my career, saying no grandson of his would be raised by a part-time mother who prioritized spreadsheets over family. And Mark, always Mark, standing there with that pained smile, later telling me his father was from a different generation, or didn't mean it that way, or you know how he is after a few drinks. Sunday morning, I drove home to find Mark in the kitchen, looking haggard. He'd slept on the couch, the pillow and blanket were still there, a prop in his performance of contrition. "Elena, thank God." He started toward me, but I held up my hand. "Don't." "Baby, I'm sorry. I should have." What defended me stood up to him. Which time? Mark, this time. Or the 100 times before when he treated me like garbage and you told me to be the bigger person. He ran his hands through his hair, his father's gesture. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The family business. The expectations." "The family business?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You mean the restaurant chain that's hemorrhaging money? The one your father refuses to admit is failing because he won't adapt his authentic Southern BBQ concept to modern times." Mark's face went pale. "How do you know about I work in financial analysis?" "Mark, you think I can't read the signs? The second mortgage on your parents' house, your father liquidating his retirement accounts, the loan sharks, excuse me, private investors he's been meeting with. He's handling it. He's drowning, and he's taking all of you down with him." I touched my still swollen cheek. "But sure, the real family crisis is that I haven't produced a son." Mark slumped into a kitchen chair. "What do you want me to do? He's my father. And I'm your wife, or I was supposed to be." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken in the hotel mirror, my bruised face in harsh bathroom light. This is what you allowed to happen to the mother of your children. I'll talk to him. He'll apologize. I don't want his apology. Then what do you want? I looked at this man I'd once loved, who I'd built dreams with, who'd held my hand through 2 difficult pregnancies and sworn we were a team. Somewhere under the weight of his family's expectations, that man had suffocated. I want you to choose, really choose, not just to say the words to keep the peace, but actually stand up and choose. Your father or your family, your real family, me and the girls. His silence was answer enough. I nodded, unsurprised but still devastated. I'll be staying elsewhere for a while. I'll arrange to see the girls when you're at work. Elena, please. You're being dramatic. It was one slap. One slap. I tasted the words like poison. One slap that you watched happen. One slap that not a single person in your family thought was worth condemning. One slap that you want me to forgive and forget, just like everything else. I left him there and drove to my office at Redwood Capital. It was Sunday, the building empty except for security. I badged in and sat at my desk, surrounded by monitors and market reports, the one place where I had complete control. I pulled up my private portfolio, hidden behind passwords Mark would never guess because he'd never bothered to learn what I actually did for a living. The numbers stared back at me. $43 million. Years of careful investments, leveraging my analysis skills, taking calculated risks that had paid off spectacularly. The commercial properties alone were worth $15 million, generating steady rental income that fed back into more investments. Mark thought I made $70,000 a year. His family thought even less of me than that, just another mouth at their table, taking up space, failing to provide proper heirs. I opened another screen and pulled up property records for Davidson County. There it was, 4457 Plantation Drive, the Hale family estate. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 3 acres of perfectly maintained Southern aristocracy, and mortgaged to the hilt. $2.3 million owed against a property worth maybe $2.8 million in this market. Richard had been using it as collateral for business loans, betting the family legacy on a failing chain of restaurants that hadn't turned a profit in 3 years. Property taxes were overdue. The next mortgage payment was in 30 days. I leaned back in my chair, my reflection caught in the dark monitor. The bruise was purple now, spreading like spilled wine across my cheekbone. They'd marked me as worthless, dismissed me as nothing. But I wasn't nothing. I was $43 million of carefully hidden something, and I was about to teach them the price of underestimating Elena Brooks. The revelation of my wealth wasn't something that happened overnight. It started 8 years ago, before I even met Mark, when I was just another analyst grinding through 60-hour weeks at an investment firm in Atlanta. I'd discovered I had a gift for pattern recognition in emerging markets, particularly in technology sectors others dismissed as bubbles. My first major win came from a cryptocurrency investment in 2016, not Bitcoin, but Ethereum, when it was trading at $12. I put in $5,000 from my signing bonus, everything I had. My colleagues laughed. By the time I quietly sold half my position 2 years later, that $5,000 had become $2 million. But I learned early to keep my mouth shut. The moment people know you have money, they look at you differently. They want things. They expect things. So when I met Mark at a conference in Nashville, I was just Elena, the data analyst with student loans and a Honda Civic. After we married and I moved to Nashville to join Redwood Capital, the investments continued. I formed Brookhaven Investments LLC, registered in Delaware with a Nashville subsidiary. Anonymous, clean, untraceable to anyone who wasn't specifically looking. The commercial real estate came next: strip malls in emerging neighborhoods, medical office buildings near expanding hospitals, a small apartment complex in Murfreesboro that tripled in value when the city expanded. Every bonus, every tax return, every spare dollar went into the machine I was building. While Mark complained about my expensive coffee habit, I bought 1 latte a week. I was quietly purchasing rental properties that generated $30,000 in monthly passive income. The technology stocks were my playground. I got into Tesla at $40 pre-split. NVIDIA when everyone thought graphics cards were just for gamers. Early positions in companies developing AI before AI became the buzzword it is today. My portfolio read like a greatest hits of the last decade's market victories. Meanwhile, I played the perfect daughter-in-law, drove my sensible car, wore clothes from Target while my investment accounts could have bought the entire store, listened to Richard lecture about financial responsibility while he burned through $100 bottles of bourbon and insisted on only the finest cuts of meat for his failing restaurants. The irony was exquisite. Here was a man who'd inherited his wealth, who'd taken a successful construction business his father built and transformed it into a vanity project of overpriced BBQ joints, lecturing me about value and worth. His business acumen consisted of stubbornness and pride, refusing to adapt when the market shifted, refusing to listen when consultants suggested changes. I'd watched it all unfold through public records and industry reports. The flagship restaurant in Franklin bleeding money, the expansion to Memphis that closed after 8 months, the failed franchising attempt that left him with lawsuits from angry investors, each failure met with more borrowed money, more leverage against assets he couldn't afford to lose. The house was everything to them. It wasn't just property, it was the Hale legacy, the plantation-style monument to their perceived superiority. Richard's grandfather had built it in 1958, back when that part of Nashville was still farmland. Now it sat surrounded by McMansions and new development, a stubborn reminder of old Southern money that wasn't actually there anymore. Patricia, my mother-in-law, hosted her book clubs there, her charity luncheons where she pretended they still had wealth to be charitable with. Mark's siblings brought their children for Sunday dinners, maintaining the illusion of aristocracy while their father's debt mounted. 3 weeks after the slap, I sat in my attorney's office, not the family lawyer Mark would expect, but Diane Hartley, one of Nashville's sharks who specialized in high-asset divorces and property acquisition. "You want to buy your husband's family home without them knowing it's you?" Diane raised an eyebrow. "That's creative." "Brookhaven Investments wants to buy it," I corrected. "A Delaware LLC with no public connection to me. I've done this before with commercial properties. This is just personal." She reviewed the papers I'd brought: property records, mortgage documents, tax liens. "They're 3 months from foreclosure." 2 months, I corrected. "Richard's been hiding the worst of it, but I've seen the notices. He's got maybe 60 days before the bank starts proceedings. And you want to offer cash?" "Below market, but enough to clear their debts and leave them with maybe $50,000. Enough to rent a nice apartment somewhere." Diane leaned back. "Why not just divorce him and let them sink?" I touched my cheek where the bruise had faded, but the memory remained vivid. "Because I want them to know it was me. Eventually. I want them to sign those papers, take my money, and then realize they sold their pride to the woman they considered worthless. Revenge is expensive." "I can afford it." She studied me for a long moment. "You know, most people in your position would just take the money and run, start fresh somewhere else." "Most people weren't slapped in front of 40 witnesses while their husband watched." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo. "Most people didn't spend 7 years being told they were failing as a woman because they didn't produce sons. Most people didn't have to sit through holiday dinners where their father-in-law openly speculated about whether his son should divorce them for someone more suitable. And buying their house accomplishes what?" "Justice," I said simply. "They believe that house makes them better than everyone else, that it's proof of their superiority. What happens when the thing they worship belongs to the person they despise?" Diane smiled then, sharp and understanding. "When do you want to make the offer?" "Soon. But first, I need to make sure they have no other options, no other buyers, no family members who might bail them out, no last-minute saves." "That sounds like you have a plan." I thought about the conversations I'd been having with Lucas Avery, the real estate broker who owed me a favor after I'd helped his daughter get an internship at Redwood, the casual mentions of development plans that didn't exist, the hints about property values that were purely fictional, the careful psychological campaign to make Richard believe he was sitting on a gold mine that only a fool would hold on to in his current financial state. "I always have a plan," I told Diane. That's why I have $43 million while they're about to lose everything. She raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. To underestimated women everywhere. I clinked my cup against hers. And to the men who are about to learn what that costs. Lucas Avery met me at a Starbucks in Green Hills, far enough from both the Hale estate and downtown to avoid any chance encounters. He was exactly what I needed: a successful broker with a reputation for discretion and a talent for manipulation that rivaled my own. Elena, he greeted me warmly, then noticed the fading bruise on my cheek despite my concealer. His expression darkened. What happened? Family disagreement, I said simply. Which brings me to why I need your help. Over coffee, I laid out my plan. Lucas listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from surprise to admiration to something like glee. You want me to convince Richard Hale that the city's planning a major development project near his property. Not convince directly, just let the information flow naturally. You know how Nashville real estate gossip works? A word here, a rumor there. And this development doesn't exist. Oh, it might. Eventually. The city is always expanding. Who's to say they won't develop that area in 5, 10 years? I slid a folder across the table. But these mock-ups I had made should help sell the urgency. Lucas opened the folder to find professional-looking development plans, complete with the city's logo and planning department stamps forgeries. But good ones. They showed a new commercial district, mixed-use buildings, and most importantly, a highway expansion that would cut right through the edge of the Hale property. This is, he paused, borderline illegal. It's market speculation. People spread rumors about development all the time. I'm just ensuring this particular rumor reaches the right ears. And when Richard hears his property is about to either skyrocket in value or get seized by eminent domain, he'll panic. He needs money now, not in 2 years when a theoretical development might happen. He'll want to sell fast to the first cash buyer. Lucas studied the plans again. And that buyer would be Brookhaven Investments, though he won't know that until it's too late. What's my cut? Your daughter just started her junior year at Vanderbilt, right pre-med. He nodded. I have connections at several top medical schools, recommendations from the right people, research opportunities that would make her application stand out. Plus, I'll cover her MCAT prep courses. That's worth more than money. I know. Lucas pocketed the folder. I have a golf game with some city councilmen this weekend. Amazing how chatty people get after a few beers at the 19th hole. The machine was in motion. Within a week, the rumors were everywhere. I heard Mark talking about it on the phone with his brother. Dad's freaking out. Something about the city planning to expand Route 31. By week 2, Richard had called 3 different real estate agents for valuations. Each one, thanks to Lucas's network, gave him wildly different estimates and urgency levels, creating confusion and panic. I watched it all unfold from my temporary apartment, monitoring through public records and the occasional update from Lucas. Richard was drowning, and like any drowning man, he was ready to grab any rope thrown his way. The rope came in the form of a call from Lucas to Richard on a Thursday afternoon at 3:45 p.m. Mr. Hale, I have a client, very motivated, looking for properties in your exact area. They're offering cash, quick close, no contingencies. Interested. I could imagine Richard's response, his pride warring with his desperation. Lucas reported back that night. He bit, wants to meet the buyer. He'll meet Brookhaven's representative, I corrected. A nice, boring attorney from out of state who handles all my LLC's transactions. You've thought of everything. Not everything, but enough. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I arranged to be at Mark's sister's house that day, playing the devoted aunt, establishing an alibi. Nobody would suspect I was orchestrating the sale while bouncing my niece on my knee. But the night before the meeting, Mark confronted me in what used to be our bedroom. I'd come to pick up more clothes, and he was waiting. I know what you're doing, he said. My heart stopped, but I kept folding clothes. You'll have to be more specific. This punishment silence, living separately, trying to make me choose. He grabbed my hands, stopping my packing. Elena, I choose you. I choose us. Come home. What about your father? I'll handle him. Like you handled him at the BBQ. Mark flinched. I've told him if he ever raises a hand to you again. Again. I pulled my hands free. The fact that you think there should be an again tells me everything. He's going to lose the house, Mark said suddenly. The business is gone. Everything's falling apart. He needs our support, not judgment. Our support. I almost laughed. Mark, he assaulted me. He's desperate. People do stupid things when they're desperate. I looked at my husband, really looked at him. Even now, even with everything. He was making excuses. Yes, I agreed quietly. They do. So you'll come home, help us figure this out. There's a buyer interested in the house. Cash offer. Your father should take it. Mark frowned. How do you know about that? Nashville real estate's a small world. I heard it at work. Some investment company. Dad's suspicious, says it seems too convenient. Pride is expensive. Mark, he can't afford it anymore. You're enjoying this? Watching him suffer? I zipped my suitcase closed. I'm observing karma in action. There's a difference. This is still about the slap. No, I said, heading for the door. This is about every moment that led to the slap, and every moment after when you chose him over me. As I drove away, I thought about Tuesday's meeting. Richard would sit across from Brookhaven's attorney, sign papers that would transfer his family's legacy to my LLC, and take my money without knowing it. He'd think he was so clever, selling at the last possible moment to avoid foreclosure. The best part. The development rumors would fade in a few months, revealed as speculation and gossip. The property values would remain stable, and Richard would realize he'd sold for nothing. No highway was coming. No commercial district was planned. Just his own panic and desperation, carefully orchestrated by the woman he'd dismissed as worthless. But by then, I'd own the house where he'd humiliated me. The symbol of his superiority would have my name on the deed, even if he didn't know it yet. Revenge, I was learning, was best served with a notary's seal. Tuesday arrived gray and humid, the kind of Nashville day where the air feels thick enough to swim through. I sat in my office at Redwood Capitol, 3 monitors displaying various feeds while my phone remained silent on the desk. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the First Tennessee Bank building downtown Neutral Ground Richard had insisted upon. At 1:45 p.m., my attorney called. Not Diane, but Thomas Brennan, the out-of-state representative I'd hired specifically for this transaction. Based in Delaware, he had no connections to Nashville society and looked exactly like what he was, a corporate attorney who handled LLC transactions all day long. The seller has arrived early, Thomas informed me. He's pacing the lobby. Nervous, agitated. He's with his wife and son. Mark was there. Of course he was. Proceed as planned, I told Thomas. Remember, you're just representing a client interested in investment properties. Nothing more. Understood. I tried to focus on work, but my attention kept drifting to the clock. At 2:15 p.m., Thomas texted, in conference room, reviewing terms. At 2:30 p.m., they're negotiating, want $2.8 million. I responded, $2.4 million, final offer. At 2:45 p.m., son is arguing against the sale. My chest tightened. Mark could ruin everything if he convinced Richard to walk away. But I knew my father-in-law's pride. Being saved by his son would be almost as humiliating as losing the house. At 3:10 p.m., Thomas called. They're signing. All of them. The wife just signed. The son is refusing. But apparently his name isn't on the deed, so it doesn't matter. The seller is... Celebrating is the wrong word. He looks like he's attending a funeral. He is, I said quietly. He just doesn't know whose yet. The next 2 hours crawled by. Papers had to be notarized, funds verified, the wire transfer initiated. I'd already had the money ready in Brookhaven's account, clean and waiting. By 5:30 p.m., it was done. The Hale family estate, symbol of 3 generations of Southern privilege, belonged to my LLC. I drove past the house that evening, not stopping, just looking. The lights were on in every room, probably Patricia crying while packing, Richard drinking himself into oblivion, Mark trying to hold everyone together. They had 30 days to vacate per the agreement, but I suspected they'd leave sooner. Pride wouldn't let them linger in a house they no longer owned. That night, Mark called 18 times. I answered on the 19th. "You knew," he said without preamble. "You knew about the buyer." "I told you there was an interested party." "You didn't tell me Dad would take it. You didn't tell me it would happen today." "Would it have mattered you were there? You couldn't stop him." "He had no choice. The bank was calling in the loans. We had maybe 2 weeks before foreclosure proceedings." "I know." Silence stretched between us. "Then, who's Brookhaven Investments?" "No idea." "Some company from Delaware. Apparently, it's convenient. Isn't it right when we needed it most? A buyer appears. Your father's not the only person in Nashville with debt problems. Mark, investment companies look for distressed properties. It's what they do." $2.4 million? Below market value? Cash deals usually are. Besides, the market value assumes a buyer who can wait. Your father couldn't. I heard him breathing, processing. "Mom's destroyed. That house was everything to her." "No," I corrected. "That house was everything to your father. Your mother just reflected whatever he valued." "That's cruel." "That's accurate. Where are they supposed to go? Anywhere they want. They have money now. They can rent, buy something smaller, maybe something they can actually afford." "You're enjoying this." "I'm observing the consequences of poor financial management and worse personal choices. This is about the slap. Don't deny it." Everything since that day has been about the slap. Mark. The difference is, I'm the only one who seems to understand that. He hung up. I sat in my apartment, looking at the papers spread across my coffee table. Deed transfer documents, wire confirmations, the new property title with Brookhaven Investments LLC listed as owner. My name wasn't anywhere on them, but my fingerprints were on every detail. 3 days later, Lucas called with an update. "Richard's been drinking at O'Malley's, telling everyone the city screwed him over. Says the development plans were leaked to force quick sales at below-market prices. Is anyone buying it?" His drinking buddies are nodding along, but the real estate community knows better. No official development was ever announced. He panicked and sold. Simple as that. Good. When do you tell them? Not yet. Let them get comfortable in their new reality first. Let them rent some apartment, downsize their lives, feel the full weight of what they've lost. And then they learn who holds the deed to their precious legacy. That weekend, I drove by again. A moving truck was in the driveway, men loading furniture. I recognized the dining table where Richard had held court, the leather chairs from his study where he'd made all his failed business decisions, the antique sideboard Patricia had inherited from her mother. I thought about stopping, about watching them load their life into a truck, but that would be premature. The revelation needed to be perfect, timed for maximum impact. Let them settle into their diminished circumstances. Let Richard's rage cool into resignation. Let Mark realize his family's empire had crumbled while he stood by doing nothing. The house would wait. It had stood for 66 years. It could stand a little longer. Empty rooms would echo with the ghosts of their superiority. And soon enough, I'd walk through those rooms as their owner. For now, I had paperwork to file, ownership to officially transfer, and utilities to maintain. Brookhaven Investments was about to become a very active property management company with one crown jewel in its portfolio. The best part, when property tax bills came due, they'd go to Brookhaven's P.O. box, which I'd collect. When maintenance was needed, I'd hire the contractors. When the yard needed service, I'd choose the company. Every aspect of maintaining their former kingdom would be under my control, and they'd never know. Not until I was ready to tell them. 3 weeks passed before I decided it was time. The Hales had moved into a rental townhouse in Bellevue nice enough, but a far cry from their estate. I'd driven by once, seen Patricia's Lexus parked outside, looking oddly out of place against the modest brick facade. The mighty had fallen, but they still didn't know who had pushed them. The revelation came on a Thursday morning at 9:15 a.m. I'd orchestrated it carefully, ensuring all the key players would be present. Mark had taken the day off to help his parents with some final paperwork related to the sale. Perfect. I arrived at their rental in my Honda, the same sensible car they'd always sneered at wearing a designer suit they'd never seen me in. When Mark opened the door, his face cycled through confusion, surprise, and then something like hope. "Elena, what are you doing here?" "I have some business to discuss with your family." "Business?" Richard's voice boomed from inside. What business could she possibly have? I walked past Mark into their cramped living room. The furniture from the estate looked absurd here, oversized and out of place. Patricia sat on her beloved Victorian sofa that now consumed half the room. Richard stood by the fireplace that didn't work, still trying to command a space he didn't own. "I heard you sold the house," I said conversationally. Richard's face darkened. "Come to gloat how typical." "Actually, I came to discuss the property." "What about it?" Patricia asked nervously. "The sale is final." "Oh, I know. I have the deed right here." I pulled the document from my briefcase, unfolding it slowly. Mark frowned. "How did you get that?" "The same way anyone gets a deed. Mark, I own the property." The silence was absolute. Richard's whiskey glass stopped halfway to his lips. Patricia's hand went to her throat. Mark stared at me like I'd spoken in tongues. "That's impossible," Richard finally managed. "Brookhaven Investments bought it? Some company from Delaware." "My company," I interrupted. "Brookhaven Investments, LLC, founded 4 years ago, registered in Delaware, with a subsidiary here in Tennessee." "Would you like to see the incorporation papers? My name is right there as CEO and sole shareholder." The glass slipped from Richard's hand, shattering on the cheap laminate floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. "You're lying," Mark whispered. I handed him the deed, then the LLC papers, then the bank statements showing the wire transfer. $2.4 million, cash, transferred from Brookhaven's account to yours. Well, to your father's creditors mostly. I believe you kept about 50,000. "How?" Patricia's voice was barely audible. "Where did you get that kind of money?" "I earned it. While you were judging me for not being a proper wife, I was building an investment portfolio worth $43 million. While Richard was lecturing me about family values and proper roles, I was buying commercial real estate that generates more monthly income than his restaurants ever did." Richard's face had turned purple. "You conniving little careful." I cut him off. "You're speaking to your landlord now. Or rather, your former landlord, since you no longer live in my property." "Your property," he repeated, the words seeming to choke him. "Every brick, every blade of grass, every memory you made there, mine." I pulled out my phone and showed them photos I'd taken that morning. "I'm thinking of renovating. That kitchen where you hosted your family dinners, I'm gutting it. The study where you made all your brilliant business decisions, converting it to a home gym. Oh, and that beautiful master suite where you and Patricia played Lord and Lady of the Manor, I'm turning it into an office where I'll manage my investments, the ones that actually make money." Patricia started crying. Mark sank into a chair like his strings had been cut. But Richard, true to form, went on the attack. "This is illegal, fraud. You deceived us. I made an offer through a legally registered LLC. You accepted. Where's the fraud? The development rumors. What rumors? I never spoke to you about any development. If you made assumptions based on market gossip, that's on you. You were married to my son. You had inside information. The only inside information I had was that you're a terrible businessman who mortgaged his family's legacy for a chain of failing restaurants. That's all public record. Richard. Anyone could have seen it coming." Mark finally spoke. "Why?" I turned to him, and for the first time in weeks, I let him see the full depth of my anger. You stood there while he hit me. 40 people watched him assault me, and you told me to forgive him, to not make a scene, to be the bigger person. I touched my cheek where the bruise had long faded. Well, I forgave him. Mark. I forgave him his house, his legacy, his entire notion of superiority. I forgave it all right into my bank account. We can buy it back, Mark said desperately. We'll figure out the money. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale for the right price. You're right, and your father already named his price $2.4 million, sold to the highest bidder, who happened to be his worthless daughter-in-law. Richard lunged at me then, but Mark caught him, holding him back. Dad, no. Let him go, I said calmly. Please, assault me again. This time I'll press charges, and we'll see how well your family name holds up with a criminal record attached. Richard strained against his son's grip, spittle flying as he raged. You destroyed us! No, you destroyed yourselves. I just bought the wreckage. I picked up my briefcase, straightened my suit, and headed for the door. Oh, one more thing. I'm having an estate sale next month. All those family heirlooms you couldn't fit in this rental. The ones in storage, I own those too. They were listed as fixtures in the sale agreement. You should have read the fine print. You can't do this, Patricia sobbed. I already did. I paused at the door, looking back at the three of them broken, humiliated, exactly as they'd tried to make me feel. You know what the funny thing is, if you'd just treated me with basic human dignity. None of this would have happened. I would have happily spent my millions making sure my daughters had wonderful lives, maybe even helped save your business. But you had to make me feel worthless. So I decided to show you what worthless really looks like. Elena, please, Mark started. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow. I'm seeking full custody given the family's history of violence and financial instability. My lawyers, yes, plural, will be in touch. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Richard tried everything: lawyers, threats, even reaching out to distant relatives for loans to buy back the house. But $43 million in assets meant I could afford better lawyers than a bankrupt former restaurant owner. Every avenue he pursued hit a wall of legal precedent and ironclad contracts. Mark called me the night after the confrontation, his voice broken. The girls are asking for you. I'll pick them up tomorrow for the weekend. My lawyer will send you the schedule. Elena, we need to talk about this, about us. There is no us. Mark. There hasn't been since you chose your father's pride over your wife's dignity. I made a mistake. No, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Watching your father assault me and telling me to forgive him. That's a choice, one you'll have to live with. What am I supposed to tell our daughters? The truth. That Daddy didn't protect Mommy when she needed him most. That's cruel. That's honest. Something foreign to your family. I know. 2 days later, Richard made his next move. He showed up at Redwood Capitol, causing a scene in the lobby, demanding to speak with me. Security had to escort him out, but not before half the office witnessed him screaming about theft and fraud. My boss, Jennifer Watts, called me in. Want to tell me what that was about? I placed the deed on her desk. I bought my father-in-law's house. Legally. He's having trouble accepting it. She looked at the papers, then at me. Brookhaven Investments, that's you, among other holdings. And the $43 million portfolio you sometimes reference in your analyses, also mine. Jennifer leaned back, a smile playing at her lips. You know, we have a senior partner position opening up, someone with your assets and acumen. I appreciate that, but I think I'm done working for other people. That weekend, I stood in the empty Hale estate for the first time as its owner. Sunlight streamed through windows I'd once cleaned for Patricia's garden parties. My footsteps echoed in rooms where I'd been made to feel small. The house felt different now, not intimidating, but conquered. I'd hired a property management company to maintain it, but I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Part of me wanted to burn it down, salt the earth, make sure no trace of the Hale legacy remained. But that would be wasteful, and I hadn't built $43 million by being wasteful. My phone rang. an unknown Nashville number. Mrs. Brooks. This is Margaret Harrison from the Nashville Historical Society. We heard about your recent acquisition of the Hale estate. News travels fast. It's a significant property, historically speaking. We'd love to discuss its preservation. Actually, I'm planning to convert it. Convert it into a women's shelter, specifically for women escaping domestic violence. Silence. Then, that would be wonderful. The estate has the space, the privacy, and the poetic justice. Yes, I thought so too. After I hung up, I walked through Richard's former study. His books were still on the shelves, pretentious first editions he'd never read, just displayed. I pulled one out, The Art of War, inside the cover, his bookplate from the Library of Richard Hale. I tore it out, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. Mark tried one more time the following week. He came to my apartment with flowers, roses, expensive ones, the kind he'd never bought during our marriage. Please, just hear me out. I didn't invite him in, but I didn't close the door either. I've left them, he said. My family. I told my father he was wrong, that what he did was unforgivable, and it only took losing everything for you to find your spine. I know I failed you. I know I should have stood up to him years ago, but I'm standing now. No, Mark, you're standing now because there's nothing left to lose. When it mattered, when it would have cost you something, you chose them. I love you. You love the idea of me saving you. There's a difference. The girls need their father. They do, and you'll see them according to the custody agreement, but they also need to see their mother valued, respected, and protected. You couldn't give them that example. I will. He set the roses on the ground between us. What happened to you? You're so cold now. No, I'm just done being warm for people who don't deserve it. A week later, Patricia called. Her voice was small, defeated. Elena, I wanted to apologize. No, you don't. You want your house back. That too, she admitted. But I am sorry. I should have said something. When Richard hit you, I should have been a better mother-in-law. Yes, you should have. Is there any chance? Patricia, I'm going to stop you there. You had 7 years to be kind to me. 7 years to treat me like family instead of an interloper. You don't get to discover compassion now that you need something from me. We're ruined. You know that. Right? Richard's reputation, our social standing, everything we built. Everything Richard inherited, you mean? And yes, I know. That was the point. How can you be so cruel? I thought about all the family dinners where she'd forgotten to set a place for me. The Christmas where she gave everyone else thoughtful gifts and handed me a generic candle. The birthday parties for the girls where she'd introduced me as Mark's wife instead of by my name. I learned from the best. Patricia, you taught me that in your world, only power matters. Well, now I have it, and you don't. She hung up crying. That night, I sat with my daughters in my new apartment, a penthouse with views of the Nashville skyline. They were coloring at the kitchen table while I reviewed renovation plans for the estate. Mommy, my eldest asked, why don't we live with Daddy anymore? Because sometimes people grow apart, sweetheart. Grandpa Richard says you stole his house. I looked up from the blueprints. What do you think? She considered this with 6-year-old seriousness. I think Grandpa Richard was mean to you. He's mean to lots of people. Yes, I agreed. He was. So maybe it's good you have his house now. You'll be nicer to it. From the mouths of babes. The renovation took 3 months. I personally oversaw every detail, transforming the Hale estate from a monument to old Southern privilege into something that would actually serve the community. The grand dining room where Richard had held court became a communal kitchen. His study transformed into a counseling center. The master suite he'd been so proud of was divided into 3 private rooms for women starting over. The grand opening was set for a Saturday in October, almost 6 months to the day after the slap that started everything. I'd invited local media, city officials, and various domestic violence organizations. What I hadn't expected was to see Mark's car parked across the street that morning. He didn't approach, just stood by his vehicle, watching the transformation of his childhood home. I walked over, feeling charitable in my moment of triumph. "It looks different," he said quietly. "It looks useful." "Mom wanted to come. I told her it would hurt too much." "She's right, it would. Dad's drinking has gotten worse. He starts fights at bars now, talking about the conspiracy against him. Nobody believes him anymore." "Natural consequences. Mark. He should understand those he preached about them enough." "The girls seem happy with you." "They are. Children flourish when they feel safe and valued. Novel concept for your family. I know." He turned to face me fully then, and I saw he'd aged years in months. I dream about it sometimes. That moment. If I'd just stood up to him, defended you, been the husband I promised to be, we'd probably still be married, living in that 3-bedroom house, and I'd still be pretending to be worth less than I am to protect your ego. Is that what you were doing? Mark, if you'd known about the 43 million, would you have stood up to your father, or would you have felt even more emasculated? His silence was answer enough. "This is better," I continued. "Our daughters will grow up seeing their mother valued at her worth. They'll never accept less than they deserve because they'll know what it looks like when a woman demands respect." The press started arriving, vans with satellite dishes and reporters checking their appearance in mirrors. Mark retreated to his car but didn't leave. He watched from across the street as I cut the ribbon, as I gave my speech about transforming symbols of oppression into beacons of hope, as the first residents, 3 women and their children, entered what was once his family home. Richard never showed, but I heard about his reaction later. Lucas told me he'd been escorted out of 2 different country clubs that week for drunken tirades about that woman who destroyed everything. His membership at the golf club had been quietly revoked. The old money families who'd tolerated him when he had wealth wanted nothing to do with him now. Patricia filed for divorce 2 months later. She moved in with her sister in Georgia, unable to bear the shame of staying in Nashville where everyone knew their story. The woman who'd spent decades cultivating her image as the perfect Southern matriarch couldn't survive its destruction. As for me, I founded Brooks Investment Group with my $43 million as seed capital. Within a year, I was managing over $100 million in assets. I bought 2 more properties that I converted into affordable housing, each purchase strategic and profitable. The financial press called me Nashville's comeback queen. Not knowing that I'd never been down, I'd just been hiding my strength. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in December. Mark didn't contest anything. He got supervised visitation with the girls and nothing else. I kept my millions, my properties, and most importantly, my dignity. That evening, I stood in what had been Richard's study in the estate, now the Haven House Women's Shelter Counseling Center, where his pretentious books had gathered dust. There were now resources about healing, recovery, and empowerment, where his leather chair had sat like a throne. There was now a circle of comfortable seats where women shared their stories and reclaimed their voices. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from Richard. "You destroyed my family." I typed back, "No." I revealed what your family always was beneath the facade: weak, cruel, and built on nothing but inherited privilege and ingrained misogyny. I just took away the mansion that let you pretend otherwise. He didn't respond. He never would. Men like Richard only knew how to speak from positions of power, and I'd taken his away with a simple wire transfer. 6 months later, I heard he'd died. Heart attack at 58, alone in a bar, still ranting about the daughter-in-law who'd stolen everything. Patricia didn't invite me to the funeral, but Mark did. I didn't go. I had nothing to say to a dead man who'd never lived with honor anyway. Instead, I took my daughters to the estate, their grandfather's former kingdom, now a shelter helping 20 women rebuild their lives. We planted a garden in the backyard, right where Richard used to hold his BBQ parties. As my youngest patted dirt around a tomato plant, she looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Mommy, are we rich?" "Yes, baby, we are." Is that why we're happy? I knelt beside her, my designer suit getting dirty, not caring at all. No, sweetheart. We're happy because we're free. The money just helps us stay that way. That night, I stood on my penthouse balcony, looking out over Nashville's lights. Somewhere in that sprawl, Mark was probably in his one-bedroom apartment. Patricia was in Georgia pretending none of this had happened, and Richard was in the ground, his legacy dismantled and repurposed. They'd thought a slap would silence me. Instead, it had awakened something they never suspected existed: a woman with the means, the intelligence, and the patience to destroy everything they held dear while building something better from the ashes. The house where I'd been humiliated now sheltered women who'd been through worse. The wealth they'd lorded over me was mine now, working to lift others up instead of keeping them down. And the family name they'd been so proud of, it would forever be associated with the cautionary tale of what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. I raised my wineglass to the night sky, a toast to every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough, who'd been hit, humiliated, or held down by those who were supposed to love her. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about becoming everything they said you couldn't be, taking everything they said you didn't deserve, and using it all to build a world where they're irrelevant. They thought that slap was their show of power. It turned out to be their suicide note. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're hearing this. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your own experiences and perspectives make this community richer. Until next time, remember your worth isn't determined by those who try to diminish you, but by how you rise when they try to keep you down.